Today we're going to start looking at sector area, which if you understand what we've seen in terms of area and if you understand how we dealt with arc, then this will come second nature to you. It's really pretty similar to what we've already seen. So essentially what sector area is finding the area of part of a circle, right? With sector, you might remember sector is kind of like a slice of pizza. Here this is a very big slice of pizza, right? But it could be smaller, it could be bigger than that. And we refer to the sector, we talk about how much sector of a circle it is by referring to the central angle. Like this is a sector that's 120 degrees of the inside of this circle, the disk of this circle. And it's contained by two radii and an arc. Those are like the borders of your sector. So the way that you calculate the area is you say, well, let me first calculate the area of the whole circle, and then since this is just a part of the circle, a fraction of the circle, let me multiply that whole area by whatever fraction this is, the whole circle. That'll give me the sector area. Sound good? All right, let's do some examples because that'll make sense. Here, let's see, I got this one here. This is a big sector, 270 degrees of a circle that's got a radius of 5.9 meters. So if you remember how to do your formula for area of a circle, then you know how to calculate the area of this circle, right? You say, let me get the area of the whole circle first. I know that area equals pi r squared. So let me just replace r in this formula with the radius in the actual circle, which is 5.9. So I do 5.9 squared, and 5.9 squared will give me 34.81. If I get my calculator, figure that out. So 34.81 times pi will give me the area of the whole circle, which in this case will be 109.36. Right? You throw that into your calculator, it gives you 109.36 meters squared. So that's the area of the whole circle. But you can look at this and say, well, 270 degrees, if I know my circles pretty well, I know that's actually just 3/4 of a circle. So I don't want the whole thing, I just want 3/4 of it, or 75% of it. So you can take your number here, multiply it by 0.75, and then you'll get your sector area, right? This is where we're getting used to thinking in sector first. This will give us 82.02 meters squared. That's the area of this sector here. Okay, so this is where I really just want you to understand first, sector is just you get the whole area and then you multiply it by whatever fraction it is to get what you want. Like if you look at this sector here, you can't see the whole circle, you can picture it in your brain, right? If you imagine like, oh, there's a big circle that would go all the way around Pac-Manning like that. If you just picture that circle, you say, okay, I'd get the area of that whole circle using this radius here. I'm going to go again with my formula for area. Area equals pi r squared. In this case, pi is not 5.9 like it was over there, it's 127. So I'm going to square that in my calculator. My calculator will tell me that 127 squared is 16,129. And then that's already a very big number, but I'm going to multiply that by pi. So pi times 16,129 gives me an even bigger number, 50,670. And to closest two decimal points, that's 0.75. But I look at this and I say, okay, I don't want that whole circle with a radius of 127. This down here, this is the whole circle with a radius of 127. Instead, 36 degrees, you might say, I recognize that. That's just 1/10 of all the degrees in a circle. There's 360 if I go all the way around. This is just 1/10 of that. So I'm going to take my area here and I'm going to divide it by 10, or I could think of it as multiplying by 1/10 to get what the area of this sector is. Now, I'm showing you how to do it this way. This comes out to being 5,067.07. It's closer to 07 than 08 because this is actually 749 something, so it's closer to 74 than 7. It's closer to 75 than to 74, but it's closer to 07 when I divide it by 10 than it is to 08. Anyway, I got the area is 5,067.07 centimeters squared. That's the area of this sector here. Okay. Now, so far I showed it to you here thinking of this is 3/4 of the circle because 270 was a nice easy number for that. 36 degrees, I noticed that was 1/10, so I just moved my decimal place over 1 to divide it by 10. But I want you to forget that whole way of doing it. I want you to understand what we're doing, but in terms of actually how I want you to manipulate these numbers, I want you to make your life a little bit easier and instead say to yourself, I don't even have to figure out that 36 is 1/10. That made things go pretty quick. you can always, even if it's not a nice number like 36, like it could be something like, in this case, it's 70, it could be something like 63 or 34 or whatever it is, you always can just say, okay, I'm still going to get the area of the whole circle using my radius. I'm still going to do area equals pi r squared. In this case, since the radius is 41, I'm going to square that first before multiplying by pi, and that becomes 1,681, right? I multiply that by pi, and when I multiply 1681 by pi, I get 5,281.0, oops, forgot the one there, 0.02 centimeters squared. That's the area of the whole circle. So I don't need to say, well, this is like, I guess 70 over 360 is like 736 or whatever. You can do that, but really you can just say, whatever I have here for my area, let me multiply that by the fraction that this is of the whole circle. And it's always just however many degrees you have in your central angle over the total number of degrees in a circle, which is 360. So when you do your 5,281.02 times 70 over 360 to get your sector area, you end up with a nice answer of 1,026.86. Don't forget your units, centimeters squared. Okay, so this works all the time, whereas this thing is, nice shortcuts, recognizing good fractions, those are great. But this one never fails you. If you have a radius and a central angle, then you can just say, let me use the radius to get the total area of the circle, and then use the central angle, multiply it like a fraction over 360, and I'll get my sector area. That's really for beginner stuff, though, because what I want you guys to get used to beyond this is a proportion that will work not only when it's nice and kind and gives you 70 and 41, but when it actually gives you things other than the radius or other than the central angle. And I'll show you what I mean. This is the way you want to learn to do it, because it'll work for any situation you might have involving sectors. You say to yourself, okay, this is the proportions, one of the big proportions I need to know for this unit, and it looks like this. Proportion's got 4 spots, right? And the bottom right spot never fails. It's always 360 degrees. That one is constant and never changes. That's great. This up here is the spot for the central angle. If you're given the central angle, you'll be writing a number in there. If you don't have the central angle, then often that'll be what you're trying to solve for. And this spot up here is reserved for the sector area, right? The sector area is what we've been talking about up there. And down here, A, that's representing our total area of the circle.